I don't know how you describe what a cinematographer's job is. Cinematography, well, it's simply telling stories with pictures, I suppose, but that's what people say, but I don't think it's quite that, really.
This is Roger Deakins, one of the greatest cinematographers to ever exist.
The thing that deeply moves me about cinema is to see 200 people in the mud under the rain trying to create poetry together.
And this is Denis Villeneuve, one of the best directors of our time. And this was the first time they collaborated on a project. This is from the 2013 crime thriller called Prisoners, and if you have never watched it, you should go and check it out. It's a fantastic story with a taste for beautiful, moody environments. And this was the second time they would collaborate, this time an intense story with still a passion for incredible camera work and lighting. But they would work together yet again on a third project, and it would end up doing this.
And the Oscar goes to Roger Deakins, Bladeunner 2049.
When an iconic duo created perfection.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
Roger Deakins and Denis Villeneuve are similar in more ways that you can think. For one, they both love using naturalistic light.
I suppose that most of the films I do are very quite naturalistic, and that fuels that. I'm constantly obsessed about how to make things look as real as possible, I suppose.
They're both pretty old school when it comes to practical effects.
Personally, when I had to do it, sometimes when you work in a virtual environment, is very difficult. I'm very old-fashioned. I respond to light hitting a table. I respond to the position of a chair in the room.
They love to work with a single camera.
I like the single camera approach. I like that simplicity. So
No matter the scale of the movie, I work with one camera.
And they both love taking their time to storyboard their scenes.
I deeply love storyboarding. Why? Because it allows me, in a very quiet environment with good coffee and no pressure at all, to dream about the movie alone, you know.
So by the time they started working on their third project, it made sense that their values would align significantly. Here's a cinematographer who loves capturing realism through his camera, collaborating with a director who tells stories on the human experience. Blade Runner 2049 was destined to be a visual treat for the eyes. During pre-production, Denis Villeneuve wanted to bring a touch of realism to the story. He wanted the sequel to have the same vibe as the original, but at the same time, a new identity, something that would let it stand by itself. Because after all, he cares a lot about the source material.
I love the first movie so much. It's a movie that was part of my cinematic education. I was raised with Blade Runner. It's a movie that was by far one of my favorite movies of all time.
So he started hiring the right personnel for the job. The cast, the production, everything had to be perfect. But more than anything, the visual aesthetic was significant here. It couldn't be just another sci-fi flick. It needed to have a sense of personality. And so, he invited Roger Deakins on board. You see, Roger Deakins is known for his naturalistic portrayal of light. He would do this throughout his iconic career. Shots that focus on a slice of reality within the presence of meaningful light. You could even go as far as to say that light itself has a personality in his shots. It is that fervent. But often, people mistake the term naturalistic to natural.
there's a difference between, in a way, naturalism and realism. I mean, you go out on a moonlit night, that's not what you imagine it looks like. If you really study it, that's not what the audience necessarily expects to see. For me, anyway, I want to create a reality.
Yeah.
I want to put the audience in a world that they believe that appears like it behaves the way the real world does to their eyes. The light behaves the way it does in the real world.
So maybe you could call it perceived naturalism, a practical approach in creating reality that looks natural to the human eye. And in Blade Runner, this was the objective. But to align with the style of the story being told, the naturalistic lighting needed a bit more expression. So the two of them met in Montreal to storyboard the whole process.
And we drew the whole movie. Basically, we did the research together. about what the movie would look like, what will be the main qualities, aesthetic qualities of the movie, and which was for me the Bible of what will be 2049.
And once they were done with the storyboarding, it became obvious that in order to portray the essence of the story, the mood that would carry visual meaning, they would have to rely on things like compositions and practical lighting, meaning the cinematography would have to do some heavy lifting. The approach was unique to begin with. Although we are talking about sci-fi here, they wanted the movie to resonate with the audience on a dramatic scale as well. And hence the slow and methodical scenes where the camera movements are kept to a minimum.
You know, I've known a lot of your kind. All useful, but with you I sometimes forget. We didn't have any of you where I was a kid.
And this is the philosophy that Roger Deakins uses in all of his shots. For him, camera movement should be deliberate. In modern films, there are a lot of cuts and perspectives and so much camera motion that isn't necessarily needed to portray the personality of a scene.
I think there's times to move the camera, there's times to follow a character, and there's times to stay back and allow that character to observe that, the audience to observe that character within the space. You know, sometimes it'd be better the actor sat down and you just looked at his face instead of he's wandering around all these wonderful locations.
Just take a look at this scene. The framing is so aesthetic to begin with. It almost feels like the geometry of the architecture frames the characters within them. It feels constrictive sometimes, something that's analogous to the brutalist architecture within this world. And that was an important style to focus on. The environment needed to be in connection with the characters and the story. And that's why they went with a lot of wide-angle shots. Shots where the subject feels a bit isolated within the frame. Something that Roger Deakins personally loved.
I think I'm drawn to desolation. Whether it's my still photographs of desolated English seaside or the American West. I'm not very good at shooting crowds. I like lonely people in big spaces, I guess.
And these frames are unlike anything that you'll see in your typical science fiction film. Here, every frame is composed to fit a specific purpose, often reminiscent of a dramatic film where the camera work induces emotions. But in saying that, it is important to note that a lot of depth and meaning were created through practical means. You see, Denis Villeneuve is not the biggest fan of green screen.
On a green screen, you are bound to computer graphics that tell you where to put the camera and what the actor, where he will look like. I was so grateful that the production agreed from the start that we will build everything.
Which makes perfect sense with the style of stories that he portrays, and combine that with the style of Roger Deakins, you get an emphasis on everything practical. Move the camera through a world that has an element of realism to begin with. All the extensions that could be visualized digitally. And the result is these incredibly vast set designs with so much attention to detail.
It's a fun set because we built practically the facade of a building. And, you know, we have over 100 lights that are each on separate dimmers to create Roger Deakins' effect that he wanted.
Even some of the things that could have been done in CG were revised to be filmed practically.
And I said, well, just do this and see if you can rotoscope it. You know, you can extract the element of the girl and just do it that. So we had it in exactly the same lighting situation. Like we talked about it. I said, Denis, let's do it on the set. And we would shoot, you know, the scene with one of the girls first. Denis would get the take that he liked, and then we would reshoot it again with the other girl.
But this only completes half the aesthetic of Blade Runner. With the camera works and compositions out of the way, it was time to focus on the lighting. And lighting and color are without a doubt the lifeblood of Blade Runner. And in a beautiful way, this movie couldn't have been made by two better artists. Denis Villeneuve, a master of color motifs, and Roger Deakins, a master of light. And you can see their imprints throughout the movie. There is a recurrence of certain colors that are thematically meaningful. Colors like green are symbolic of life, and in a dystopian world, it can be symbolic of hope. And Denis makes sure that it has an impact while being portrayed, such as in this scene.
Dr. Anastaline,
where the garden is a reassuring break from watching the consuming brutality of the cyberpunk landscapes. And thematically, the lighting is also quite motivated. They often utilize moving practical lights to emulate an expressive reality.
And then so there's this one character that Jared Leto plays, and I just wanted his interiors to kind of always be about moving light, as though he had this sort of sunlit interior in this world that's full of fog and snow outside, but he's created this artificial kind of world. You know, discovering things like, you know, you have a water on a ceiling and you put light through it and you get wonderful caustics. And so it was all that.
Even in the shot with the giant Joy advert, the lighting had to be interactive. Sure, this was definitely a job that involved the use of CGI, but for Deakins, doing that was not going to help with the immersion. Much like everything else in the film, he wanted to give it a touch of practicality. We shot the pink joy element first. When we shot the scene with Ryan, I felt it important that we play the element at a true scale so that the lighting could be interactive between the advert and Kay. There's rain and fog in the scene, so we filled the stage with mist and had this 40 by 30 foot LED screen playing back the image that we had shot during pre-production. The pink and blue advert was basically lighting the whole shot, the atmosphere and Ryan. The light changes as the advert changes. The fog is another aspect that adds dimension and depth to these frames. And if you observe really carefully, the fog isn't just something that is added to give it that moody atmospheric feeling, which is often its purpose in cinema. But here, it is much more thoughtful than that. The fog conceals a lot of stuff in these compositions. It's almost like a dark cloud hanging over humanity. And within the fog, Denis is mindful of the importance given to the aspect of life, and whenever nature is portrayed in the film, it's in contrast to the overall dark aesthetic. The colors and the lighting make sure it captures that feeling.
So I think to really understand light and be able to light, you have to understand how it makes you feel. You could light it a million ways, but what do you want the audience to feel? That's the important thing. What's the script? What's the story? What's the scene? What's the individual shot you're shooting? And what do you want the audience to feel?
And that's the hard thing to pull off. There's an element that is hidden deep within the heart of cinema that only comes out when you do things with an intention. It's almost like this emergent property that comes from how the visuals make you feel. After all, cinema is a visual medium, and there's a way to tell a visual story. It involves a great deal of understanding of camera motion and an even greater understanding of colors and light. And that's what Blade Runner 2049 was able to capture. And when you combine the expert cinematography of Roger Deakins with the intentional realism of Denis Villeneuve, you get a film that will live on in the human mind for years to come. A true visual masterpiece.
And they have that meaning is something that is orchestrated by the movement in front of the camera, the light, the design, the elements that create a meaning that is not tangible, qui n'est pas tangible, that is invisible. It's called poetry. And that, at the end of the day, is beauty of cinema. And as a filmmaker, you try to create as much moment like that as possible in a movie.